So I was hanging out with one of my besties, and she reminded me that, oh, Valentine's Day is coming up. And I went, oh, I don't really care. But then I realized that, oh right, I run a Dungeons & Dragons advice channel, and one thing where a lot of people need a lot of advice is some D&D romance. Now, I'm not trying to say that you guys as Dungeons & Dragons players lack game, but as an Arrow Ace person who has never had to flirt in his life, I will say that you may lack some element of... Look, mostly joking, but seriously, D&D romance and tabletop romance in general is something that is so fun. Even as somebody who doesn't usually care for romantic plot lines on movies and television, I do like playing them out at the table. They can really build up a character and sometimes act as a really neat way to further somebody's character arc. In many cases, it's actually the best way to further certain character arcs. Now, let me make this clear. Romance is by no means mandatory. I mean, again, I'm aromantic and asexual. If anyone's gonna say romance is not mandatory, it's gonna be me. But if you want to do a D&D romance at the table, there are so many ways to do it right. And unfortunately, we read so many stories where it's done wrong. So today, I'm gonna be taking from that experience and making my third D&D romance video in an effort to get you guys to your perfect love interest in-game. Of course. In terms of real life, you're on your own, man. Without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so before we get started, I do want to give a shout out to Stephanie Plays Games. She gave a shout out to my video, an old video of mine where I talked about D&D romance. Both videos are worth watching. And Stephanie and I and old me and basically everyone who talks about tabletop romance are going to give the exact same piece of advice, which is this advice right here. You need to talk to the person that you're romancing. I mean, this one's an obvious one. Communication is a big part of romance in the real world, so it should be a big part of your fake romances too. You don't want to make people uncomfortable, and figuring out what people's boundaries are and what their expectations are for this romance, those things are not just helpful, they are mandatory. You need to do this. I'm not trying to say there's no room for spontaneity. Like, maybe you'll let out a flirty line here or there. But if you want to commit to an in-game relationship, you have to talk about it. It doesn't need to be before the campaign. It can absolutely be in the middle of the campaign. Hell, maybe you'll do this multiple times. And when we say things like, communicate at your D&D table, I feel like sometimes YouTubers, including myself, can kind of leave out the part of what you actually say. Like, what's this communication like? Are we having a therapy session in the middle of all this stuff? And no, it's not that serious. Your communication is probably going to be something fairly casual. A few text messages, a Discord call, a chill conversation over some beers. It's nothing crazy. It's literally just asking the person like, hey, what do you want out of this plot line? In fact, communication about D&D stuff in general, including this, can be really fun. If you want to see an example, me and Fall Cosplay talked about our romance between my character Yumi and her character Cleo on a podcast, like live in front of an audience. You can watch us do that, and it's fun. Like, I'm having fun with that conversation because I'm talking about my D&D character. For God's sakes, who doesn't like talking about their D&D character? Now, I've given this advice before. Stephanie gave this advice. Everyone gives this advice. But I want to add a little piece of advice to this. You might want to communicate with the rest of the table too. I don't think this is as like do or die as communicate with the person that you're romancing, but establishing what the heck's going on with the rest of the party can also be very helpful. This is especially true with the Dungeon Master. Like, just ask your DM, hey, what are your expectations for romance at your table? Again, I kind of making this sound a little serious. This does not need to be a serious thing. A couple text messages shot back and forth. It's all very casual, very easy. There's no need to be nervous about this kind of thing. Romance, for better or for worse, touches on topics that some people are uncomfortable with. Yumi's story contains a lot of themes of abuse, like seriously dark stuff in some aspects of her story. And before the campaign, the 10th Tomb, started, I decided that some of that stuff is going to be downplayed for the camera, not just for the viewers, but also for the players. I don't need them to experience all of the extreme hardships that were written into Yumi's backstory. And even though that wasn't in a romantic context, it's still the same principle. The principle of talking to your damn table. Like, yes, It might work out for you where everyone has the same expectations by sheer universal coincidence. But do you really want to risk it? Nah, just talk to your friends. It shouldn't be that big of a deal. This one is a big deal for me, maybe less so for you people in relationships where you've experienced actual dating and actual flirting. But as a dude who has never tried to date anyone in my life just because I'm not interested in any of you people, I needed some help. Like, I needed help to romance somebody in my D&D game. I don't know what to say. I don't know what romance looks like. Like, before doing the romance in Girls Worth Fighting For, my one-on-one D&D game with Fall Cosplay, where we further explored the romance between our two characters, I was looking around on Reddit for examples of the asexual romances in video games, television shows, and movies, because those kind of romances are not often explored. Someone who's asexual but still romantically interested in someone. And someone provided me the perfect example with a character from Outer Wilds. I watched all of their scenes, watched their dialogue, and it really helped me to find the vocabulary required to play Yumi during this game. There's a scene in that game with Fall Cosplay where Yumi comes out as asexual and tells Cleo that she's nervous that her lack of intimacy is going to ruin their relationship. That scene and the dialogue from it is largely based on Outer Wilds. Having something to fall back on really helped me, especially since, like, look, Fall Cosplay and I, we're friends. But we only know each other online. She lives in Australia, for God's sakes, on the other side of the planet. We are not that close. So obviously me and her flirting, it is kind of nerve-wracking for me as somebody who's never flirted with anyone before in real life. And yeah, the communication between the two of us, that really helped. Us being familiar with each other and comfortable with each other, that helped. But being able to fall back on those scenes from Outer Wilds, giving me the vocabulary I needed to play Yumi, that was the most helpful thing that I didn't even expect to have going into this game. I'm so grateful that these random Reddit users managed to recommend me Outer Wilds. And I recommend you also find romances that you think are similar to yours, the vibes that you want to emulate. Find those and use them to make your romance all the better. Don't be nervous about ripping things off. I mean, we say this all the time for D&D in general, but especially with romance. Like, romance is nerve-wracking. Having a crutch like that is not a problem at all. Don't torture yourself over originality. Embrace your inspiration. Okay, this next one, I don't want you to get too up in your head about it, but it is worth considering. Why do you want a romance? Like, when I'm watching a movie or a television show and a romance is just like shoehorned in there with nothing added to the plot, that really annoys me. The Flash television show did this constantly, with characters just falling into relationships for the sake of falling into relationships. Romances need to have a reason to be there. Most often, it's just that a story arc is elevated by the romance. For example, romances in Baldur's Gate 3 are not necessary for any of the companion characters. However, having a companion character be a love interest with the player character does build up that story. You don't need to romance Shadowheart in order for her story arc to make sense. But when my Dark Urge character also romanced Shadowheart, it did elevate her story in a lot of ways. For example, when she dyed her hair white, she directly cited my Dark Urge breaking free of her god's control as a reason why she did that, inspiration that pushed her forward. That relationship elevated her story. So bouncing off that, how does this romance help to elevate your character's arc? Find those ways that your romance elevates your story, and trust me, it's going to be a lot easier to integrate the romance into the general campaign. Talk to your DM about it too. Like, your DM is intrinsically involved with creating and curating your character arcs at the table, so maybe the two of you can go to your DM and be like, hey, DM, when we're doing this romance, could you involve it in the campaign story in some way? It is important, right here I want to bring this up, and I mentioned this in my last episode about romance, but it is important that your romance doesn't spotlight hog. Don't be afraid to have your romance take up time at the table. It should. It's part of the story. But don't have your romance take away time from the other players to an insane degree. Like when you're doing scenes between your two characters, make sure to involve the other characters in some way. And when you inevitably do a scene that's just one-on-one between the two of you, or however many people are in the romance, I don't pass judgments like that here. But anyway, when you're doing scenes that don't involve the other characters, make sure to monitor them. You know, if you have Discord, look at the face cams. If you're at a table, look at their faces in real life. Just check if they're getting bored, checking out, going on their phones. But it's actually funny because that problem of people going on their phones during your romance because they're bored, that's actually helped if you have your romance be relevant to the campaign. Like, people are a lot less likely to be bored if they're invested in your story. So yeah, yet another reason to more closely integrate this plot line into the greater campaign. It helps the rest of the party and the Dungeon Master be more invested. And it helps you be invested too. Just a win all around. Okay, final piece of advice, and this is one I really needed to work on myself. Embrace the cringe. The first time I ever did a romance, it was between Kali Sulfero and Daphne Norwan, two characters from my first ever D&D campaign, my first ever multi-year long saga, and it was awkward. It was me and my friend Kyla, and we were weird about it because it was my first ever campaign. It was her first ever time playing. And yeah, when she tried a pickup line on me, I got clammy, I got awkward. It was kind of cringy. But that is something you have to embrace. You have to embrace the cringe at your D&D table. Now, of course, there is absolutely a bad form of cringe, like if you're doing a romance without communicating with the other person and they don't want to do it and you keep on pushing it forward and you're being creepy. Yeah, that's bad. Like that kind of cringe, you don't want to be that. But if you and the other person are just like trying your best to be the best kind of romance at the table and it's just kind of awkward, that's okay, man. Look, roleplay in general is a place where you just need to embrace the fact that you're not professional actors. You're people just trying your best. And that kind of amateurishness needs to be embraced. Otherwise, you're not going to have a good time role-playing at all. That's why I always encourage people to shut down other players who are making fun of someone's romance. Like, you need to shut that down immediately. If that is normalized at your table, no one's going to role-play ever at all. It is especially sensitive with romance because, again, for better or for worse, people are awkward when it comes to intimacy. So if someone tries a pickup line at the table with their romantic partner and it's kind of awkward, embrace that, all right? Laugh it off and move on. Don't let the fact that you're not experts in this stuff dissuade you. You're gonna learn over time. It's gonna be weird at first. Hell, that's often how relationships are in real life, if we're being honest with ourselves. So embrace that cringe and make it all the more fun at your table. Just at the end here, I want to remind you, Valentine's Day is not just for the lovers out there. It's also just for the besties, the friends. You celebrate all kinds of relationships on Valentine's Day. In that same sense, this video is also going to be really helpful for any kind of relationship at the D&D table. Friends, siblings, whatever. All of those will be really helped by open communication. All of those are going to be helped if you embrace the cringe. All of those are going to be helped if you have something to fall back on as inspiration. This is any kind of relationship, not just romantic ones. We often think of romantic relationships as like the apex of a relationship, but that's not really true, is it? It's just a different kind of relationship. So if you're interested in romance, fear not, for you can still have an awesome relationship at the D&D table. Whether it's platonic or whatever you want it to be, trust me, this video, it'll help you out. But yeah, this video was honestly kind of hard for me to do off the cuff, but I hope it helped you guys out. If you guys did enjoy it, you might enjoy our main channel where we cover all kinds of tips and tea. But before you go, please leave a like on this one and subscribe to Crispy's Academy so you don't miss any of our content as it comes out. And finally, if you want to leave your own tips or thoughts, go down in the comments down below. If you can't leave a comment, leave the comment any relationship. Tell me I made it at the end of the video. In essence, like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you all next time. Farewell. Where's the info? Where's the info? So I was hanging out with